Okay.
Welcome everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Joe. I'm the manager of the Aquaculture Information Exchange. We are a social networking platform backed by NOAA and the USDA, and we are, imagining new ways to connect, collaborate, and learn among aquaculture professionals and enthusiasts. Um, and typically, I host these connect and learn presentations where our members share their expertise on various topics. But today, actually, we're going to have Bailey, who is our new intern at the Aquaculture Information Exchange, facilitate. So, everybody, give her a warm welcome and take it away, Bailey.
Thanks, Joe. Hi, everyone. My name is Bailey. Um, like Joe said, I'm the new Aquaculture Information Exchange intern. But broadly, I'm an intern with the Virginia Sea Grant this year. I'm a first-year Master of Arts student at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, studying science communication. So I'm really excited to be a part of the AIE team and help facilitate these sessions and just help with the website design and the community that we're growing here. Um, so I have the pleasure today of introducing our presenter for this Connect and Learn session, who is Alex Wright. He is a PhD candidate at UC Davis, and he's going to be presenting on disease management practices across California's aquaculture industry. And I also want to do a quick plug right now for our YouTube channel because this presentation, along with all of the other Connect and Learn presentations, will be posted there. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat so all of you can make sure to subscribe and keep up with videos there. And without further ado, Alex, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Bailey. And thanks, Joe. I'm excited to be here to share some of the work that I've been doing for my PhD dissertation. And I'm going to add a little spoiler that I'm also going to plug our YouTube channel at the very end. So stay tuned for that. But today I'm going to be talking about aquaculture disease management practices in California aquaculture. This project was done in collaboration with Doctors Carly Moody and my research advisor, Dr. Jackson Gross. This project was funded by the California Department of Food and Agriculture and the Antimicrobial Use and Stewardship program. All right, so a little bit about me. I am a multidisciplinary biologist, originally from Delaware, where I studied marine biology. After I graduated, I moved on to fisheries biology and worked on commercial and recreational fishing vessels as part of the Northeast Observer Program and with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. So these experiences created a passion for sustainable seafood for me. And that's what drew me to UC Davis, where I'm now a PhD candidate in animal biology. And I'm involved heavily with the Aquaculture Cooperative Extension Program. So at the Aquaculture Cooperative Extension Program, our mission is primarily to provide science-based support to the California aquaculture industry. And this includes the producers, state and federal agencies involved with aquaculture, and also the general public who may or may not realize the importance and impact that aquaculture has in California. So we have a lot of different research topics. We're pretty broad in our interests. We work on disease management in aquaculture. We have projects on sturgeon health and nutrition. We have a lot of animal welfare projects that occur directed towards the commercial and conservation aquaculture industries. We also do some hydroponic plant production and experiments with soilless media. And these are all using aquaculture effluent water to grow these plants. We also are interested in climate stressors and how they affect shellfish growth and reproduction. So as an extension-based lab, we also produce a lot of extension resources. These they come as posters, infographics, articles, YouTube videos, some youth-based workforce development, and some short courses that are offered at aquaculture facilities. And so today I'm going to be talking about our project looking into disease management practices in the aquaculture industry. So unfortunately, as we were finalizing this project, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife was hit by a major bacterial disease. This disease was Lactococcus garviae, and it was a bad combination of an emerging and a resistant disease. So this disease was never before seen in California, and it was also resistant to all treatment options that were available. So unfortunately, it resulted in the department having to euthanize more than 3.2 million trout in that year. And to make matters worse, it came back the following year. So the 1 year later, when water temperatures increased, the disease emerged again. But at this point, the department was better prepared and had initiated vaccinations for the uninfected fish. So what is the significance of this new emerging and resistant disease? Well, the Department of Fish and Wildlife is tasked with raising these fish for conservation and recreational purposes. So this disease drastically impacted the agency's conservation efforts. And these fish are also raised and released into local rivers and lakes to create these recreational fishing opportunities. And while some anglers do engage in catch and release, a lot of these people will end up consuming these fish. And so even these conservation fish, they could end up being consumed at some point in their life. So any disease that's present in these fish could end up impacting human, animal, or environmental health. And this can spread the potentially harmful bacteria and any genetic resistance to an antimicrobial that may exist within the bacteria. So this whole concept illustrates the idea of the One Health principle, which is simply acknowledging the interconnectedness of human, animal, and environmental health. So I mentioned resistance. So antimicrobial resistance occurs when a bacteria becomes resistant to an antimicrobial compound. This is known as a very dangerous problem that's arising. Antimicrobial resistance can be spread when the genetic instructions are transmitted between bacteria. And bacteria can also accumulate resistance, so they can become resistant towards multiple antimicrobial drugs. And this is especially a problem when we consider that there are a class of antibiotics and antimicrobials known as the medically important antimicrobial drugs. And these are critical for maintaining human and animal health. So this problem is recognized by the UN, the United Nations, as being a top issue of concern in the world. And many countries have taken steps to reduce the development and spread of antimicrobial resistance. In the US, effective January 1st, 2017, the Federal Drug Administration, the Food and Drug Administration, released the new guidelines for using antimicrobials in food production. So they issued the Veterinary Feed Directive, which required a licensed veterinarian to issue this VFD in order for an animal agriculture producer to administer antibiotics using animal feed. And the following year, California took an additional action on this, where they extended this BFD ruling to include all medically important antimicrobial drugs. And now any type of antibiotic or these myads required a veterinary prescription in order to be used. This California law also established the Antimicrobial Use and Stewardship Program, or AUS, within the Department of Food and Agriculture. And as I mentioned in the beginning, this is the program that ended up funding this research. So the regulation of aquaculture is really under the jurisdiction of the Department of Fish and Wildlife. But the Department of Food and Agriculture also has an interest in assisting food producers, and they were recently tasked with better understanding the use of antimicrobials in food production, and that also includes aquaculture. So this brings us to the role that was filled by my advisor, Dr. Jackson Gross, with my assistance. As the aquaculture extension specialist for UC Davis and the UC system, Dr. Gross was asked to help fill the gap of information about disease management and the types and purposes for antimicrobials that are used in aquaculture. So this brings us to our project, which was called the Commercial Aquaculture Stewardship Guidelines and Best Management Practices. The objectives of this project were simple. We were to conduct a broad literature review about disease management practices in California aquaculture, the disease challenges that may exist, and alternative strategies for disease treatment. We also surveyed the aquaculture industry to get a better understanding of the disease challenges and the specific needs of the industry. Using this information, we then developed antimicrobial stewardship guidelines that were to be used by the industry to assist with their disease treatment strategies. And finally, we disseminated extension resources. So as I mentioned earlier, there are a wide variety of types of resources that we created. And so we ended up using, again, the results and information from the survey to create these resources and extend the survey and the information we gained to a broader audience. Now, to accomplish these objectives, we devised these steps, which were to assemble a work group of experts in the aquaculture space to assist with accomplishing these project objectives. We performed a comprehensive literature review on the topic. With the work group, we developed a survey. We conducted the survey with the various members of the aquaculture industry. And when we analyzed the data, and using those results, we produced publications and a variety of extension resources. So the first step was to create this work group. And we felt that it was really important that the work group had diverse representation between academic researchers from the University of California. Specifically, we had aquaculture toxicology researchers, AMR and food safety specialists, and a fish veterinarian and pathology researcher. We also included industry representatives from the California Aquaculture Association and a local aquaculture production manager. And then we also included the regulators, which were the Department of Food and Agriculture and the Antimicrobial Use and Stewardship program. And then later on, we also included a shellfish pathologist as we decided to interview the shellfish producers as well. So this group helped define the project's trajectory. It ensured that we accomplished the stated objectives while also being mindful of the industry's interests. We acknowledged that there was going to be some sensitive information discuss as a part of this project. So we wanted to be mindful of that, especially when considering that we would be inquiring about disease outbreaks, disease treatments, and we would also collect other proprietary information. So we wanted to ensure that the information collected would not be used in any negative way towards the aquaculture industry. So this all enabled us to maintain a good rapport with the industry, and this encouraged engagement with the researchers and academics, and primarily assisted us in getting survey participation, increasing that, and especially considering that the survey was entirely voluntary. So we wanted to ensure that participants felt that the information was not going to be used against them later on. So with this work group, we began assembling this comprehensive review document that was being created for the regulators. So we developed these 5 different sections, discussing California aquaculture, the types of antimicrobial products that are used in aquaculture, disease, the types of diseases and the types of treatments used in California aquaculture, the idea of antimicrobial resistance, any evidence of that in aquaculture, and how that relates to the One Health approach. And then also we discussed current strategies and future methods for disease management. And these could include alternatives to antibiotics. So we created this vast document to provide additional information for the Department of Food and Agriculture. We provided this information to meet their specifications and their interests. And this was all really important, again, because the Department of Fish and Wildlife is who primarily regulates aquaculture operations. So we needed to provide additional information for the Food and Agriculture group. So this review was really intended to inform the Department of Food and Agriculture of the disease management strategies and the challenges experienced by the industry, and also what the industry needed in order to become more successful, and to also protect the health of their stock of their fish or shellfish. Prior to this project, we knew that antimicrobials were used to protect animal health and to prevent the spread of disease. But specifically, we wanted to know what the role of a veterinarian played in disease management, and what types of diseases does the commercial industry experience? What types of diseases are they especially challenged by? And what are their treatment strategies? We knew that antimicrobials are available to aquaculture practitioners, and they can be thought of as there being 2 types of antimicrobials. We have our biocides, which are really important for cleaning, disinfection, and your biosecurity protocols. You also have your therapeutics, which are used exclusively for disease treatment. And so these therapeutics include antibiotics, which are also classified by the FDA as medically important antimicrobial drugs. But we also have other antimicrobial compounds. So whereas antibiotics will require veterinary approval and a veterinary prescription, other antimicrobial compounds can be used to treat a disease, primarily external diseases that could be fungal diseases or some type of bacteria. So with biocides, there's a lot of different types of those. They're really important for disinfection and general cleaning. So we have our general use disinfecting products. These are like products like Clorox, Lysol, bleach. We also have disinfecting products specific for aquaculture use. These are things like Virkon Aquatic. Then there are also these biocides for pest control, and these are primarily herbicides and algicides to help maintain water quality. There are also antimicrobials for disease treatment. So these are ones that do not require a veterinary prescription. So there are three classes in the eyes of the FDA. You have your low regulatory priority drugs like iodine, acetic acid, or even sea salt. You have your deferred action drugs, copper sulfate and potassium permanganate. And then we have FDA approved antimicrobial drugs. And these, again, are not considered as antibiotics. And so these are hydrogen peroxide, formalin, or chloramine T. And then finally, there are antibiotics. These are also considered antimicrobials, but due to the specific action mechanism of these antibiotics, they are considered medically important antimicrobial drugs. So in order to use these in fish, we would need to acquire a veterinary prescription. And so there are only 3 antibiotics approved for use in aquaculture. You have oxytetracycline and florfenicol, and then there's one other that I don't believe is available anymore. So moving on, now that we have a better understanding of the industry and the diseases in aquaculture, our work group began developing the different surveys for the various sectors of the aquaculture industry. Our product ended up being the 2021 California Aquatic Animal Health Needs Survey, and it was designed for multiple sectors of the industry. So each sector raises an aquatic animal for a variety of purposes. So the participants of this survey were primarily the commercial producers of food fish, or are also our commercial shellfish producers for food. But we also included restocking, recreational, and conservation aquaculture operations. So only some of these we deemed were eligible for the survey, and I'll get into the eligibility requirements later. But we also included the natural resource agencies. So that meaning in California, the Department of Fish and Wildlife. This was in response to the commercial request to include these producers, which makes sense because they are also actively producing fish, and they rely on antimicrobials for disease management. So we felt it was really important to include the natural resource agencies in this aquatic health needs survey. The contents of this survey were fairly broad. We collected a lot of different types of information. We collected general operation information, current and emerging disease concerns, disease treatment strategies, animal health and biosecurity protocols, and also some information about the use of any alternatives to an antimicrobial product. So this could be a strategy they use in order to avoid using one of these products, or it could be some novel product that is functionally different than an antimicrobial, but still effective at reducing the incidence of disease. So in total, we had 3 survey populations. We had our commercial finfish producers, commercial shellfish producers, and our Department of Fish and Wildlife salmonid hatcheries. So members of the industry were identified by using the Department of Fish and Wildlife Aquaculture Registration Program. So this made it fairly easy for us to find the contact information of all of these producers, because all facilities that engage in the transportation and controlled growing or harvesting of fish, shellfish, or plants, they are all required to have a registration with the CDFW aquaculture program. So using this list, we identified all of the survey participants in in each respective sector. Now, our eligibility requirements did not include all of the registered aquaculturists. So after going through the list of producers on the aquaculture list, we realized that some of these facilities were not actively raising fish for consumption, or they weren't actively raising fish which could be consumed. So that was an important distinction for us to make. So after going through the list, we identified the facilities that either produce fish or shellfish for food markets, or they produced fish for commercial fisheries or recreation or conservation purposes, which could ultimately be consumed by humans. And also there needs to be some form of intervention during the rearing process. And this primarily was considered as health monitoring and feeding, active feeding of the fish. So these were our two eligibility requirements. After going through the list, we realized that only 30 out of the 77 registered fish producers were considered eligible for the survey. So this meant that 47 were ineligible. And we identified one of these reasons for their ineligibility. So they were either not operational, they solely transported fish, meaning they brought fish from one location to another and held them in a tank, during the transport, or the facility did not intervene in the rearing process. And this was primarily considered as like a recreational pond. There were a number of registered aquaculturists that were exclusively like a homeowners association or a campsite that has a pond that they stock with fish and they provide this fishing opportunity. So since they don't intervene in the rearing process, we felt they were ineligible for the survey. Now for shellfish, in 2021, all 22 facilities were considered eligible. All of these products could be consumed or would be consumed. And likewise, all 21 Department of Fish and Wildlife hatcheries were considered eligible. Each of these hatcheries releases fish in the environment for conservation or recreational purposes. So the survey was divided into 7 sections following this outline. We had our general facility information, like what's your production volume, your annual production volume, where do you source your water, general antimicrobial product usage questions, like how often have you used one of these products, what are your record keeping protocols like, facility operation specifics, like what are you raising, what species, what's the purpose. We also inquired about the disease challenges they currently experience and how they prevent them. We asked about their disease management protocols, like their animal response or your animal health and response protocols, your biosecurity protocols. And we also asked specific questions about how you clean certain elements of your facility and your aquaculture system. And then we wrapped it up with asking about the alternative strategies they may use for disease prevention. And like I said, these could be alternative products or alternative strategies, like reducing stocking density or paying a premium for a more, a better feed source. So we found that feed was a very important component here too. So our survey methods, they required adaptability, and this was something we figured out as we were working. So when we first started, thinking of this project, we were planning on doing site visits to go to each aquaculture facility, collect the information, and then move on to the next facility. But unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this was not feasible. So what we did instead was we started off with phone calls. So I would email a producer, try and schedule a phone call, like a phone interview, and I would walk through each question with the producer. But this was fairly time consuming for the producers. And so in order to increase our response rate, we developed and adapted the survey into a PDF document that they could fill out and email back to us on their own time. And so we found this was really appreciated and helped increase our response rate. A unique thing with the CDFW facilities is that all of these facilities are under the jurisdiction of the Fish Health Lab, the CDFW Fish Health Lab. So this program oversees the animal health for all of the facilities in the state. And so we reached out to the lead veterinarian at this lab, and we worked with them to devise a way to increase our response rate for these facilities. So we ended up splitting the survey for them into two different surveys. One was considered the general survey, which was completed by the lead veterinarian. And so this one included all questions that were fairly consistent and common between all of the hatcheries. Then we also had the individual hatchery specific survey, which we sent to all of the facilities, and they individually completed that section. And so this included specific information regarding their operations and their diseases that they've experienced and their treatment strategies. So after data collection, it was time to go through the data and start analyzing the results. So we found, these are some of the main findings of our survey. Firstly, we found that the antibiotics are rarely used by the commercial fish sector. And when they are used, they're used exclusively as a prescriptive disease treatment strategy. The commercial shellfish industry never used an antibiotic. Now, the CDFW facilities, they used antibiotics more frequently, but it's also important to keep in mind that they have an extensive network of veterinarians, and they also experienced a wider variety of diseases. So it kind of makes more sense that they would use antimicrobials more frequently. Many of these fish are also returning from the environment, so they are collected and reared from there. So they can introduce a lot more pathogens, potential pathogens. Another important component that we realized was that fish veterinarians and the shellfish health specialists are crucial for the identification, treatment, and management protocols. Many of the fish and shellfish producers in the commercial sectors, they did not regularly communicate with a health expert. And we acknowledge that these health experts are crucial for these three components of disease management. So more effort needs to be taken towards reaching this commercial sector and developing a professional relationship with these producers, and also just being available for questions and concerns. And lastly, we felt that protocols are essential for this disease management in aquaculture. Many facilities did not have biosecurity or animal health protocols readily available for their staff. And we felt that this was a really important component to disease management. So providing open access to these types of protocols is needed by the industry. And we should also work on updating the guidelines for disease treatment. Many survey participants felt that there was a lack of access to information regarding disease treatment, like the different types of treatments and other strategies. And also there was some confusion around the antimicrobial regulations. And a lot of producers felt that their disease challenges, they didn't have the resources or tools to remedy the disease challenges that they experienced. So I'll go through a couple of the questions to give you a feel for the nature of the survey. So these are some selected questions pertaining to the disease management practices for our three different aquaculture sector populations. So we have our commercial finfish, our CDFW facilities, and our commercial shellfish. So we asked the question, did your facility experience a bacterial disease in the last 12 months? Not that only 25% of the shellfish producers experienced that type of disease. CDFW salmonids, most of them ended up experiencing one. We also asked about their antibiotic usage in the last 12 months. And interestingly, the commercial finfish sector really did not choose to use antibiotics, even despite experiencing a bacterial disease. They chose not to use an antibiotic. But antibiotics were used more frequently by the CDFW facilities, and they were never used by the commercial shellfish sector. Many producers opted to use an antimicrobial product like hydrogen peroxide that does not require a prescription. So 71% ended up using an antimicrobial product to treat the disease. We were also interested in if they had an established relationship with a veterinarian. Not that we had slightly over 50% of the commercial fish sector having this relationship with the veterinarian. 100% of the CDFW facilities. But for the commercial shellfish sector, this question was changed to say, do you have a relationship with a shellfish health expert? Since veterinarians don't cover shellfish, we asked if they just had a trained scientist who they would consider as an expert, assist them with any disease challenges. And surprisingly, 75% of the commercial shellfish producers did have some sort of relationship with a health expert. A few more questions where we asked about testing water quality parameters like temperature, pH, oxygen. We asked if they screened for any diseases specific to the species that they raised. And not that many commercial fish producers ended up screening for diseases, whereas the CDFW facilities, 100%, they were always screening for any potential disease. Does your facility implement a biosecurity protocol? And surprisingly, only 53% from the commercial fish side have a written down biosecurity protocol. Many producers said that they do follow biosecurity protocols, but they don't have one written down and available for staff. And similarly with the shellfish industry, slightly more than 50% had a biosecurity protocol written down. And then lastly, does your facility have any animal health protocols that detail the prevention, control, or treatment of a disease? And we felt this was an important question because this can increase the disease response rate if they have a protocol like this available. Personnel can react and respond more quickly to any signs of disease. And I'm sure you'll notice that for the CDFW facilities, all of the facilities have, they answered yes to these 4 questions. We also asked a couple more insightful questions. So these stood out to me as being fairly important. What do you feel are the greatest contributing factors to disease? Are all of your disease challenges remedied by the treatments available? If not, what do you attribute this to? And which alternatives to antibiotics do you use? So with the first question, the top three answers are fairly interesting. Both commercial fish and commercial shellfish, they indicate that temperature and contamination by wildlife are top factors for disease. And interestingly, the number one response from the commercial fish sector is density or crowding, which is entirely a management decision. And this was recognized as a top factor. Are all of your disease challenges remedied by the treatments available? So we had 50% of commercial fish producers say yes. 13% said they did not have a disease. They did not have any disease challenges. So when asked, when the 37%, 6 respondents, when they were asked, what do you attribute this to, not having their disease challenges remedied, the majority said there was not enough effective drug or treatment options. And a significant amount said they experienced difficulty navigating the regulations concerning drug treatments. For the commercial shellfish side, the majority said no, our disease challenges are not remedied by the treatments available. So 70% felt that they struggled with disease. And that was primarily because there is no treatment strategy for diseases that occur in shellfish. So both of the commercial sectors felt that there was a lack of disease treatment options or strategies. And that was the main reason for their disease challenges continuing to exist. And then lastly, which alternatives to antibiotics or strategies do you use to reduce drug use? And again, it's interesting that the most common alternative strategies are management decisions. So these top three are things that a producer can do. They can start implementing these protocols and these procedures to reduce stocking density, increase monitoring of the water quality, and then be able to respond when water quality enters into a zone where you might expect a disease. And you can also enhance fish nutrition. Many producers acknowledge the role of diet in maintaining the health of the animal. So some even use probiotics and prebiotics. But all of this is to say that fish nutrition ends up being a very important component to reducing and preventing disease. And the shellfish side, again, these were all management decisions that they found can increase the health of their stock. So, and to reiterate all of this again, our primary goal for this project in our lab is to extend these research findings to various audiences. So we wanted to communicate these efforts to the scientific community, industry stakeholders, and the general public. And to reach these different audiences, we utilize different types of resources. So we started by publishing the results. So here's a publication that's in review right now describing the California aquaculture industry and its disease management strategies. We also published our literature review. We adapted the document produced for the regulation industry or the regulators. We adapted that document to the format of a scientific review paper. And in that paper, we devised this way of thinking about disease prevention and mitigation. We thought about it as existing as 3 levels. So we have our comprehensive protocols, which prevent pathogens from entering the aquaculture facility. We had our level 2, which was good husbandry strategies, which served to prevent or to deter pathogens from entering the animal. And then level 3 was our effective antimicrobial products. So if a pathogen gets around level 1 and it ends up entering the facility, it also avoids detection and ends up into the animal. That's when we would use the effective antimicrobial products to eliminate the pathogen. So we like this concept, these 3 different levels of disease prevention. So we took this from our review paper and we developed our extension posters. So we had these sent to all aquaculture producers in the state. So we had our tips for reducing disease in aquaculture, and this is where our 3 levels of disease prevention comes out. So we have our facility protocols, good husbandry strategies, and disease management. We also developed our antimicrobial product stewardship posters to just inform producers and the industry about the global issue of antimicrobial resistance and how they can, what are the goals of stewardship and how can they use these products in a way that maintains these stewardship goals. We also used digital media to reach a broader audience. So this was really targeting people who are interested in aquaculture and enjoy watching YouTube videos. So we have our YouTube channel, This is Aquaculture, where we have a variety of video productions about different farms around California, different types of aquaculture, how aquaculture is done in the state. And so within these videos, I developed 2 that were specific to this project and to aquaculture disease management. So these were a lot of fun to make, and we felt that this was a really good resource for people who are interested in casually learning about disease prevention practices and is your seafood safe? And so why you should know where your seafood comes from and how regulators and producers ensure the safety of the seafood. So with that, I will wrap it up by saying thank you again for taking the time out of your day to listen to me and to learn about this project. If you have any questions or you want to contact us for more information, my email is listed here, and my advisor, Dr. Jackson Gross, he'll be more than happy to assist as well. So at this point, I'll open up for any questions.
Thank you so much, Alex. That was a really wonderful presentation and incredibly informative. I see that Paul and Kathleen have already asked some questions in the chat, but before we get into that, I do want to just drop this exit survey into the chat for these Connect and Learn presentations. So while the Q&A is going on, if everyone has a second to just fill out this survey, it really helps us improve these sessions. So yeah, Alex, if do you see the questions in the chat?
Yeah, I see them here.
If you want to just kick off with those and then wait for some other questions to filter in.
Yeah, so Paul was wondering if there was a publication planned for this to report on this effort. And yes, we have one being reviewed right now. Hopefully that's approved soon. But yeah, that review will be, or that report will just kind of describe the California industry, the different areas. So we have our fish producers, shellfish, and algae producers. And then we also have the natural resource agencies. So this publication will describe each of those sectors and then start to talk about select questions from the survey pertaining to disease management. So that will be a peer-reviewed paper coming out at some point. And then, so Kathleen wondered why vaccine use was so low. I would say that it's primarily because it may be because producers do not feel that they're really that affected by disease, and that their current strategies are sufficient in reducing the occurrence of disease. But certainly the CDFW facilities, they're really forced to implement vaccines more frequently. As I mentioned in the beginning, they experienced the lactococcus disease. So that was a good example of a major disease that happened, and there was a quick turnaround to produce an autogenous vaccine that was effective specifically for those fish in those hatcheries. Okay, so let's see.
Oh, and Alex, just before you move on with other questions, Benny also had a question about if there's a way that we could access the slides that you've presented.
Yeah, I can. I can most likely send them. I don't have them online right now, so I probably would have to send them to you or post them on the AIE website.
Yeah. In the Connect and Learn group could be useful just to like keep it in that like group. But yeah, feel free to send it to like either me or Joe, and we can like get that out on the AIE for sure. And then this Connect and Learn session will also be on the YouTube.
And I just saw Margaret's question about if those posters that I showed, if they were available to the public or in a digital format. And yes, they are. I did post them on the AIE extension group, but I can certainly post them again in another group. We found that they were really informative. Oh, and I forgot to mention that we produced them in English and Spanish. So that's, that was a really important thing for us to do, because a lot of the personnel working on these aquaculture farms is Spanish speaking, like that's their first language. So in order to convey the important message of, how do you reduce disease incidence? Like, what are the simple things you can do to reduce disease? In order to convey that message to a broader audience, we produced both of those posters in English and Spanish. I see Joe posted the link for that. And then TJ said, is there a market incentive for commercial producers to avoid using antibiotics? Absolutely. I don't know if there's a label. I know that certain like distributors will have those requirements. Like Whole Foods is a great example. Like they are known to be very picky in terms of like what seafood they sell. So as a seafood producer, as an aquaculture producer, you have to meet the Whole Foods standards, and they look at every component and every aspect of production. So that would be a major incentive to be labeled as antibiotic free. So there's certainly a market incentive, and there may also be, I don't know, we didn't go into too much depth about what fish you are using antibiotics in. We didn't go into depth as to how much antibiotics do you use. It was simply a yes or no question. Have you used one in the last 12 months? So that the answer, like an answer of yes to that question, could also indicate that antibiotics are used for the brood stock. So the fish that are used, and they need to be in peak health condition, because those are the fish that are used to spawn and to continue the production cycle. So those fish are arguably the most important fish at an aquaculture farm. So antibiotics being used in them may be more important than using there may be other strategies for disease prevention in your like your grow out fish, the ones that you end up sending to market. Yeah, so other languages other than, yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So with the posters, yeah, English and Spanish are the two dominant languages, but there are, going through the list of registered aquaculturists in the state, there are a number of, other languages. I'm not entirely sure of the language, but we certainly have Chinese producers and Vietnamese producers. And there are certainly people who speak those languages who work on other aquaculture farms. The difficulty with that would be, finding someone to do the translations for us. But that would certainly be helpful as well.
And then Kathleen had a comment, would be interesting to compare the economics of disease management between a private farm and state hatchery, if you have any comments about that.
Yeah, and I think TJ's comment about the market incentive to avoid using antibiotics is an interesting component to that. Yeah, it would absolutely be interesting. The state hatcheries, their goal is, and their whole objective is to just raise these fish, keep them healthy for release. So they're not really looking at, necessarily the economics behind it. Their purpose is conservation and providing these recreational fishing opportunities. Whereas a private farm is interested in maintaining these animals in order to be sold to a food market or sold to a recreational fishing pond. Yeah, so we have another comment about, yeah, Kathleen, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. We have another comment about transportation of fish being a vector for disease transmission. So that was actually, that was part of our questioning, like that this was a component of the survey as well, was asking about, do you have a quarantine procedure or protocol? Like like a lot of aquaculture farms, I guess aquaculture companies, they have different farms in different areas. So there will be one company that operates 5 different facilities. So transportation of fish between farms is certainly a vector of disease. And so we did include questions about that. How many, do you have a quarantine procedure for those fish that are transported? Do you transport fish? And this also extended to shellfish as well. Do your animals cross state lines? How often do you transport them? What does that look like? Do you have the health certificates for these animals when you do cross state lines? So yeah, transportation is certainly something. Yeah, but I don't think we saw any trends with that. Our survey response rate was great, but just the sheer number of participants still kind of made analyzing the data for statistical significance, it made it a little difficult for that. We only had 17 survey participants, which was more than 50% of the industry, but of the eligible industry, but yeah, still was not a high enough N value to give us some good statistics.
Thank you so much, Alex. I think we're going to wrap it up there.
Okay.
Thank you all so much for attending this session. If anyone has any extra questions for Alex, feel free to reach out to him directly or connect with him on the AIE. This Connect and Learn session will be up on the YouTube, so you all can access that later, and we'll get the slides out as soon as possible. Joe, do you have anything to add?
That's it. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you, everyone. Have a good
one.